What's up, guys? Mr. Dan here, back again with another review. This time it's the early 80s slasher Deadly Games, written and directed by Scott Mansfield, starring Steve Railsback. This is a curious one. I have the Arrow Blu-Ray here. There's the slipcover. Pretty cool dice here with the spikes. And yes, that is a female body in the background. I just figured that out just now. I thought it was the topography of the landscape. There's the back. Here's the cover of the actual Blu-ray. The reversible cover art is the same as the slipcover. Comes with a little card and a little booklet. Let's take a look. I would watch the movie before I read the essay in the book. First, let's take a look at the cast. There's the cast. Joanne Harris is Keegan. She's the main female protagonist. She comes back into town to find out what happened to her sister. Sam Groom plays a policeman who is investigating the case named Roger, and he served in Vietnam with his best friend Billy, played by Steve Railsback, who's kind of an oddball who unfortunately was wounded in Vietnam and has some scarring, and he's not very physically fit. So, for example, when they play a friendly game of touch football, he just kind of hangs out and watches, wearing his dark glasses most of the time. And then you have Dick Butkus in this as Joe, and then a whole cast of characters. Colleen Camp, some recognizable faces in here for sure. And the essay is called The Games People Play, Exploring the Midwestern Gothic in Deadly Games by Amanda Reyes. And, her work is very good. I follow her on Instagram. She really specializes in made-for-TV movies, but she's very knowledgeable about film overall. So I'm just going to read this. The Midwestern Gothic works against the Midwest's reputation for friendly neighbors and safe small towns by portraying these spaces as remote and isolating. Expansive land rolls into voids of nothingness and becomes a metaphor for the bleak, dead-end existence of the residents. Yeah, a lot of the residents seem very happy on the surface. This is like an unusual slasher. They're all adults. And when I mean adults, they're actual adults. They're not adults playing high school students. And yet the one thing that they have in common, that this has in common with a lot of slashers, where you have high school students, is there's a lot of infidelity. So, it's a picturesque small town on the outside with a nice movie theater downtown, kind of historic and movie theater. But under the surface of this nice town, you have all kinds of infidelity. The main character, Roger, one of the main characters, Roger, it's an open secret. It's not really a secret at all that him and his wife are sort of separated, so they're both messing around with other people. He becomes involved with the Keegan character, who comes back into town to find out what happened to her sister. And there's actually a pool party where you see all kinds of infidelity going on. So, on the one hand, you have a small town with adults this time, but they're actually, in some ways, they're acting like high school students, sort of expressing that as an outlet for that repression of in a small town. It's a pretty good small town feel overall. And plot-wise, what happens is, as I said, Keegan comes back to investigate the death of her sister. The opening sort of set piece where she's receiving threatening phone calls is pretty good. Kind of interesting, considering that obviously there will be many films that follow in the footsteps of this one where threatening phone calls are made. No, it's not from inside the house. But at one point she looks outside, and this being the early 80s, and it's kind of funny. It's the early 80s, but it's a very small town. And she seems to be out in the middle of nowhere, and yet she looks outside, and there's a shadowy figure in a phone booth that seems to be in the middle of nowhere. So then something happens. Was it murder? Was it suicide? Well, you could probably figure that out. And then as the sister comes into town and sort of reconnects with some of her old friends and acquaintances, a few more murders occur, of course, and the detective and Keegan start to have a relationship. And this is not, there's a little twist at the end, and it was not that surprising, really. I mean, I kind of figured out who the killer was. You can kind of figure it out almost from the casting. But there's a twist upon the twist, which I found interesting. I wasn't crazy about the very last scene, the way they ended it. They kind of left it up in the air, sort of, kind of, but it was okay. As far as the action goes and the kills, this isn't like a kill movie, It's not that kind of slasher. It's like a character-driven slasher. There's a lot of dialogue in this film. Having said that, there is actually one sequence in a pool that would satisfy any fan of slasher films. It's really well done. A lot of small town sort of banter. There's some flirtatiousness going on between Keegan and Roger. You know, and some of it's a little goofy. Like people go up to each other and pretend to be reporters and put a pretend microphone in front of their faces, and then they play along with it. Or they go to the movies and they pretend to be an old couple bickering. And it goes on a while. And even when she's home alone, she kind of talks to herself. You know, it's a little cringy at parts, but I kind of appreciate it that this is more of a character-driven story. Having said that, some of the set piece scenes where the females are being stalked are pretty good, and they all seem to live in these buildings or houses that are like, or how they have bedrooms that are like 90% window, so they're inside, and you kind of get this feeling of doom as they're being sort of stalked. And basically, where the deadly games comes in is that, as an outlet for their boredom and their sort of angst, Roger and Billy kind of hang out at the movie theater where the Steve Railsback character, Billy, is a projectionist. So they kind of lose themselves in kind of the way a lot of us do, in talking about old movies and which old movie they're going to order next and watch. And they also have a board game, which is a sort of a monster-themed board game, which they play. And that's kind of where the title comes in. And I should say the movies that they talk about are old horror movies. So the movie theater setting is cool. And, I won't really say too much more about the plot other than, like I said, there's a little twist at the end. I kind of did enjoy it. It's a very interesting movie if you're into slashers. I will say that. There's lots of commentary and special features. So I'll have to check those out. But overall, I recommend this for the curious. And as far as recognizable people, most of us know Steve Railsback. This was a few years after he played Charles Manson in the movie Helter Skelter. He would eventually go on to play Ed Gein in a movie called Ed Gein. Quite a creepy performance. And I know I've mentioned it like 10 times, but he's even in this kind of gem of early 70s cinema, Cockfighter, where he plays an up-and-coming young cockfighter, and he's kind of a nervous Nelly in that too. So he's really good at these sort of creepy, nervous roles, and he's probably the most recognizable person in here, I would guess. But overall, I enjoyed it. I'll check out some of the special features if you're a big fan of slashers and you want to see some elements that would appear in later slashers. You might want to check this out. Have you guys heard of this? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks.